we're going to be looking at Jesus' parable of the wicked servant who wants forgiveness for himself but won't extend forgiveness to somebody else. Here's Rembrandt's version of a scene out of that. You can even see the bills, the accounting is right here. That says, "Oh, you owe 10,000 talents," and he's, "Please have mercy on me." So Matthew 18. Here's the context. This is told after the transfiguration. Jesus is doing final ministry in Galilee, and it follows that discussion among the disciples about who's going to be greatest when Jesus takes that little kid and puts them in, and then tells the parable of the lost sheep, where the 99 good sheep get left behind because of the one lost bad sheep that ran off. And then it's, if your brother sins against you, and then the parable as a response to Peter's question about, okay, if we have to do this forgiveness thing, how much do we have to do on this forgiveness thing? That's Peter's trying to quantify it, right? 7 times. You've all heard that it was like, 3 was kind of the maximum you had to do according to custom back then. Once was like, okay, yeah. 2 is like, what's going on? And 3 was like, I'm now being dumb for letting you walk over me this many times. Peter seems to be extending and being, okay, I'll be super gracious. I'll go 7. And then we have this parable comes up instead, is Jesus' long-winded answer. And then in chapter 19, we go to teachings on divorce. And the rich young man, that's the guy who comes to Jesus and says, all the commandments I've always kept, and Jesus says, well, go sell all the money sell everything you have, give the money to the poor, and come follow me. And he's like, ooh, I'm not willing to do that. So here are the 3 elements that I see as key in this parable. The first is the king's generous pardon, the 10,000 talents. Then that same servant who gets forgiven that amount, his like, well, I have severity. He's a cheapskate. He's like, I want for me, but I'm not going to give. And then finally, the king's rightful condemnation of the forgiven servant's bad behavior because of what he did to his fellow servant. Okay, we've already. How many times shall I forgive my brother when he sins against me? And then 7 times, 77 times. The Greek is open to 490, 70 times 7. It could go either way. The idea is you can't, by the time you get to that number of counting, you're going to lose track. How often will I forgive? Peter says, and rightfully so, I understand Peter's thinking on this, is forgiveness is risky, because if I forgive somebody, I could put them in a position where they could hurt me all over again. So is there a way to limit my risk? Because that's the nature of forgiving. How many times do I have to do this? Because I could, and like I said, Joseph has this one big magnanimous forgiveness at the end of his life, or at the end of, the end of the story. You meant it for evil. God made it work out for good. I'm in this great position because of what you did. You're obviously really, really repentant. I can forgive. But that's not realistic for most of us. Most of us are definitely dealing with real people in real life where forgiveness is, it's awkward, it's hard to even talk about. It is hard to say, I forgive you, compared to, oh, no worries. Or, de nada, it's not a big deal, Well, no, forgiveness is a big deal. And to say, I forgive you, read a really interesting book this week by a guy, Lutheran, Missouri Synod guy out of Portland, Oregon. So one of the more pagan cities in America. And he himself got into the church by being a drummer. They had a praise band at the church, and they were looking for a drummer, and they brought him in. And not a believer, really kind of with, nothing about God. In fact, if anything, was hostile and just that sort of generic hostility towards God that's part of life. And then watched how that group cared for him, prayed for him, and slowly was brought into the faith to the point where he married the pastor's daughter. Then is now teaching at the seminary that I graduated from. Before that, he taught at Concordia Portland before it closed. And he said, so I was doing, and he was teaching theology and Bible in Portland, Oregon. And so he said he had to sort of say, here's how this class is going to work. I'm not saying that you have to be respectful or that you have to agree with me or be a believer. Not asking for that out of you. I'm trying to teach at a college level. This is how theology works. You're welcome to push back on it, but we will always be respectful to each other in this class. You have a different theology. I will be respectful of it. You will be respectful of this one. And they were like, how do we make this thing work when we're dealing with people? And his whole book was about when Christians actually live out things like forgiveness and say things like, I forgive you, as opposed to, oh, no big deal. He said there was something powerful in his life when he saw Christians put that faith into action, that it led him to faith in Jesus, adult baptism, the whole 9 yards. So it's one of the best books I've seen on doing church in post-Christian America, as opposed to just going, I want the old America back, because it's not coming, folks. It's just not. Peter's thinking like an accountant, a generous accountant, but nevertheless an accountant. I can't risk forgiving too many times, because if I forgive that many times, this person's just going to make a habit out of sinning against me. So how do I limit that person's bad behavior? We covered this one already. 77, we covered that one. Limitless forgiving is pretty biblical. I mentioned it briefly in the sermon. Many times when we forgive limitlessly, what other people hear is, oh, you are saying I can treat you badly because you're always going to forgive me. And your forgiveness means our relationship goes back to where it was before I sinned against you. And forgiveness is not forgetting and saying, oh, let's pretend it never happened. Forgiveness is saying it really happened. And as a result, our relationship has changed. I'm not going to hold this sin against you and not forgive you, but at the same time, you have shown me something of yourself, and our relationship is going to have to change. How does trust come back? By the one who was untrustworthy, proving themselves trustworthy regularly, repeatedly, and consistently. So I haven't had to deal with this, but other pastor friends of mine have, and they were dealing with helping a couple recovery from marital unfaithfulness. Okay, so a big sin in our common language. How can I trust you again? I want to forgive you. We have kids. I want to preserve our marriage. But how do we go forward on this? How am I doing?
Oh, you're good.
All right. And part of it was phones are a huge part of our life. And he said, your spouse will have access to your phone 24/7. You will tell them all of your passwords, and you will allow them to have access. Early on, because you were having an affair, your spouse has the right to call you at any time on your phone. If you have a problem, if your boss has a problem with that, sit down with your boss. It's your responsibility to sit down with your boss and say, this is what I'm dealing with right now, and I'm trying to save my marriage. I need to be able to if my wife texts me and says, where are you? I need to be able to say, here I am, and the tracking on my phone will match where I say I am, because I'm trying to regain trust. Can HR work with me on this? And it was like, wow. And don't get me wrong, there were some people who were like, I have to do all that? And it's like, yeah, you destroyed a trust relationship. You have the responsibility of rebuilding trust, you know. But I thought she was going to forgive me, or he was going to forgive me, because it actually works both ways. And yeah, forgiveness covers the past, trust covers the future. Trust is something that you earn. And you know, so in my family with addiction, you know, people early on in their sobriety would be like, I'm going to a meeting every day. I'm meeting with my sponsor all the time. And then, you know, I had one aunt that probably by the time she died had 25 years of sobriety. Okay. She did not need to go to an AA meeting every day. But she went consistently because she said, now my responsibility is to help other people the way people helped me when I was just getting started. But I'm no longer in this desperate place. So in the same way, rebuilding trust, once you start proving I am a trustworthy person again, the need for follow-ups to retest your trustworthiness get less and less over time, because you're proving you're trustworthy again. Forgiveness covers the past, trustworthy, that's a future thing. Does that make sense? Because that's a big part of where people go, I don't want to forgive because I don't want to let this person hurt me again. And I get that. But that's where forgive and forget is really bad advice. Because if you forget, it's like, oh yeah, go ahead, hurt me again. No. Kingdom of God, king who wants to settle, we're going to skip through parts of these. Limitless forgiveness, story reinforces that point. Kingdom of heaven, this is just a Matthew Hebraism. Matthew avoids using God's name when he can because he knows the people he's writing to would prefer that. Settle accounts. So in Jesus' day, kings often farmed out or sold for a certain sum. You could tax. This is how tax collecting worked back in Jesus' day. You know, you can collect the taxes on these towns, but you will bid for the right to that work. Or it could have been that this was a lesser prince, or you know, a duke, and he borrowed 10,000 talents to put in an aqueduct. Only the aqueduct never got built, and he never collected the revenue off the aqueduct, and now the bill has come due. Those are options. Settling accounts is Last Judgment Day. We're going to skip that one. 10,000 talents. Master ordered him to be sold, wife and children, so that he'll at least recoup part of the money. The debtor did not come in on his own. The debtor did not come willingly and say, "Oh, king, I've lost $10,000. Please forgive me." He has to be brought in. Maybe he was just hoping for a bookkeeping error. Whew, they've lost track. It's kind of like those people who claimed COVID benefits they didn't deserve, and they went, "Oh yeah, they won't catch up with me." Whoops, they just did. It took them a few years, and now you owe it with interest. 10,000 talents. Various scholars try to figure this out in modern currency. The idea is to convey a ridiculously large amount. It's an amount greater than anyone could pay back. A talent was either 1,000 or 10,000 denarii. A denarii was a day's wages. You know, think of what you made in a month, divide it by 28, and then do the math, and you can make your own number. But we're talking thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars, the equivalent. This is not the sort of thing that I will go, you know, flip through looking for quarters in the couch and make a dent on this one. This is a unpayable debt. There were rules for how you sell people off in the Bible if they owe you money. There's also examples of it didn't always work according to the rules. The creditor has come. And you know, some of you who were in part of the Cambodian missions, you know, we still have issues where people will sell a child in parts of the world because the family's in debt, and this daughter is kind of a mouth to feed. We don't have the, but how much will you give me for my daughter? And she's going to get a good job. And a lot of these are the people who end up in human trafficking and sex trade. But same thing still goes on. Servant falls on his knees. Be patient with me. I will pay you everything. Okay. And the master, out of pity, forgives him. So the distressed servant, he's making promises that he can't possibly keep. Did I tell you about my yacht trip? My one time I was on a yacht? Okay, Sheboygan, Wisconsin. This is not a big fancy yacht. This is not like Russian oligarch yacht. This is nice cabin cruiser on the Great Lakes. And I was a summer camp counselor, and we had what were called junior counselors. And the junior counselor says, hey, my dad wants to take everybody out on his boat. And so meet at the Sheboygan Yacht Club. Woo, it's not that fancy, let me tell you. But we all get on, and Dad provides dinner, and we go cruising down the coast, and off the state park, he anchors, and we can all go swimming off the boat, and we're having a grand time. And we're then get back in, and we're motoring back, and one of the counselors reaches into her purse and grabs a $5 bill and says, to help pay for gas. And the guy laughs, and he says, honey, that's not even going to touch what I'm spending on gas. This is a gift. You've been nice to my daughter all summer. She's fit in here. Since her mom and I divorced, she's really struggled. This is the best summer she's had. I am grateful to you. This is a thank you. You cannot pay for it. Trust me, $5 is going to go nowhere on the maintenance of this boat, let alone putting fuel in it. So thank you, but no. This servant is kind of trying to do the $5 thing, like, oh, I'll pay it back, and it's an impossible task to be paid. So he's asking for patience. It's misguided. Pity, master release. Compassion goes far beyond. He doesn't just say, yes, I will give you time. You can work on this for the rest of your life. And, but the king says, let's wipe the whole thing clear. So the offended receives consequences. The pardon does not say you're innocent. It says you're pardoned. Okay, which is altogether different. Again, forgive and forget seems to say, oh, let's pretend it never happened. No, it really happened. And seems like he even keeps his employment. Same servant goes out, finds a guy who owes him 100 denarii, 100 days' wages, a substantial sum. Seizing him, begins to choke him, saying, pay what you owe me. His fellow servant fell down, pleaded with him, have patience with me and I will repay you. So went and found out. Did he go out and search, or did he just run into the guy? The Bible's not clear. The suggestion is that maybe he is going around trying to collect, and he's still going to try to pay off the debt that's been forgiven. Don't know that for a fact, but it's an interesting speculation. Fellow servant, the first was definitely an unequal relationship. The king and a servant. This is among equals. So God, us, you and me with each other. How do we get along? Seizing and choking. This is far rougher than the behavior he was brought to. Wages for a day's work. So 3 to 4 months worth of work. So a substantial sum of money, but substantially less than 10,000 talents. And it's reasonable that given time, this person could make a good dent on paying that back. So have patience. Both men fall down and plead. So the point seems to be Jesus is pointing out they're exactly the same. One just has this tremendous debt, and one has a much smaller one. But it's the character of the one, the difference between the king and the forgiven servant. Man refused, went out, had him put into prison until he should pay. When his fellow servants saw what has taken place, they were greatly distressed, and they report to their master, the king, all that had taken place. There are no biblical references other than this one to debtors' prisons, but it was a pretty common concept. And it would be the sort of place where you owe money and we will put you into, if you read Dickens, the workhouse, and you will go there, and we won't just garnish your wages, we'll barely feed you, and everything you make goes to your debt. And that was the idea. But whether those, Jesus was at least aware of it. The point is the contrast between the two men. So let's call him the 10,000 talent man and the 100 denarii man. They're both equals. And the shockingly unfair treatment has the people around, fellow servants, going, this is not how we want to behave. This is not the... So if you were in 21st century America and you were a corporate trainer, you'd say, what's your corporate environment like? How do things work in your system? How emotionally healthy are things? And these servants are going, this is not behavior where we're going to turn on each other, particularly when we've been dealt with graciously. We saw how gracious the king was to you. You could extend a little bit of grace. And if we're going to become a corporation or a business or a government where we're always watching our back because somebody's threatening us, that's no fun. So this bothers them, and they appeal, and they say, no, we don't want to live like this. So the master summons him, meaning the 10,000 talent guy, and calls him wicked. I forgave all that debt of yours because you pleaded with me. Keep in mind, he pleaded for patience, and the guy says, no, I'm going to forgive. Should you not have had mercy on your fellow servant as I had mercy on you? Paul summarizes this by forgive as the Lord forgave you. Some of you have seen my bucket and BB illustration. That's where, I sin against Judy, Judy sins against me. Surprise, we're married. And we can, I can focus on the one thing she did that really, really irritated me. And we can drop a single BB into a galvanized pail, and boy, does that make a sound. You can hear it roll around in there, just like the way how I'm mad at somebody will roll around in my brain. And then the next thing I do is I pour 10,000 BBs in on top of it. And all of a sudden it gets real quiet because they just fill the bucket. When we live in that place of going, this is how much I have from God, it makes it easy to forgive. Got that one. This is an interesting word to me, calling the guy wicked, because whether the guy was dishonest and lost the 10,000 talents or just incompetent and lost 10,000 talents, the king doesn't seem to care about that. He can be generous and gracious. Maybe it was just, the guy invested on something and it just absolutely went belly up. Okay, that happens. It's his failure to be gracious that's driving the king and causing him to call him wicked. It's not the fact that he made a bad deal and lost 10,000 talents. That's like immaterial to the king. Okay, maybe he was like a venture capital guy, right? You invest in a bunch of things and hoping that one of them's a unicorn, we put $1 million into pets.com. That didn't work out. But we also invested in Google. That one did work out. I thought this one fit nicely. Jesus teaching to you and I about how we handle our worldly wealth. Use it to gain friends for yourself. And when it's gone, you'll be welcomed into eternal dwellings. Oh, Bob, good to see you. You were gracious to me. That's why I'm in heaven. Should you not, as I had? That's the pattern. I did this for you. Should you not have copied me? So grace is exhibited first, and then king is hoping I give grace. My subjects will therefore be gracious. Very similar to what we pray in the Lord's Prayer. Forgive us as we forgive others. Help us to follow in that copy pattern. You forgive, we forgive. Deliver jailers, another condemnation of Jesus. We used this one on Sunday a while ago about we're really good at finding the speck in other people's eyes, but we can't see the problem within our own eye. So my heavenly Father will do to every one of you if you do not forgive your brother from your heart. Paul expands on that. Why do you judge your brother? Why do you treat him with contempt? We're all going to stand before God's judgment. Surely as I live, says the Lord, every knee will bow before me, every tongue will acknowledge God. Each of us will have to give an accounting before God. This, for Christians, is not the accounting, do you go to heaven, do you go to hell? That was decided when we put our faith in Jesus. That was decided at the cross and the resurrection. What this is saying is, what have you done with what I have given you? And that is a question each of us is going to have to face Jesus and say, how did I do? You know, you and the parable of the talents fits in here, okay? Some of you were given this, some of you were given that. The question isn't, why did somebody get more than others, but what did you do with what I gave you? And the older we get, or the older I get, the more I think about this. It's not something I worry about, but I'm going, yeah, I want to make sure that when people will ask me, why do you do this on something in ministry? And I'm like, because I have to stand before Jesus on the last day and say, you entrusted this congregation to me, and here's what I tried to do. I'm confident he will forgive me for my stupid mistakes, but at the same time, he's going to be saying, how'd you do? Did you do good stuff? Or did you just say, well, I don't know, world's changing, I don't know what to do? It's one of the reasons let's try stuff, let's swing at targets around here. Because I know all of us are going to have to stand before Jesus and say, well, yeah, Jesus, I got to tell you, we invested here, and it, boy, belly up on that one. I don't think Jesus is going to be going, boy, yeah, bad ROI, guys. I think he's going to be going, well, good for you for trying. On the other hand, he's also going to be going, hey, but did you see where this one, I always tell the story, we thought we were going to be heavily involved in Hispanic ministry, because at the time the neighborhood was heavily Hispanic. We put volunteer hours, tens of thousands of dollars into it. We hired staff, and it went belly up. I don't think God in heaven was going, boy, didn't see that one coming. On the other hand, when we got a whole bunch of Cambodian folks that relocated here, all the people that were teaching ESL Spanish folks were like, oh, we can help. And we ended up doing a whole bunch of baptisms of Cambodian folks, And I think on the last day, Jesus is going to say, isn't that funny? You guys invested like mad, and that one didn't work out at all. But you see what I did there? So we're all going to have to give an account before God. That includes, how do I work at forgiving? Or am I going to show up and say, yeah, God, I'm finally going to get even with these people? So the forgiveness we've received from God for our unpayable debt of sin is supposed to lead us to forgive our fellow human beings from far more trifling debts with which just come from living as broken people in a sinful world, and not hang on to the anger and hang on to the revenge scenarios and hang on to those things, but instead say, how do I get over this? Again, one of the main teachings that came from me when I would teach this was the absolute necessity of saying the go forward on trust is different from the go backwards with forgiveness. Because so many people think forgive and forget means when I say you're forgiven, it's like saying it never happened. Forgiveness says, no, it happened. It had to be forgiven. If it has to be forgiven, it was a real thing. And as a result, our relationship is changed. It's forgiven, but it is changed. I'll leave you with a Luther quote. And he actually uses the phrase, I deeply love. deeply loathe forgive and forget. But this is Luther's idea on it. I'm going to go upstairs and get ready for second service if you just would turn everything off at your convenience. Oh, and Greg needs his microphone back. Thank you, Greg.
You bet.
Have a great Sunday.